The Lycan bit the vampire to kill her, and the Lycan prince standing over her body looked just as horrified as she felt. His eyes, molten gold and wild with panic, met hers as the bond snapped into place between them, a golden thread that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, binding natural enemies in a way that made her want to scream and reach for him all at once. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. "What did you do?" Serafina gasped, her hand clutching at her throat where his teeth had torn through her pale flesh moments ago. The wound should have been fatal. Lycan venom was the only thing in this world that could truly kill an immortal vampire. But instead of death's sweet darkness, she felt him inside her mind, his fury and confusion mixing with her own terror. Cale Thornwood, crown prince of the Northern Pack, stumbled backward, his hands shaking. "This isn't possible. I bid you, to end this war before it consumed another generation." His voice cracked, and she could feel the echo of his words inside her chest, as if they belonged to her too. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The ballroom around them was in chaos. Wolves and vampires who had been locked in a fragile peace negotiation now scattered, weapons drawn, the treaty shattered by what everyone had just witnessed. Blood, her blood, pooled on the marble floor, black as midnight against the white stone. "You felt it," she whispered, because she could sense his emotions now, overwhelming and raw. "The bond. We're mated." The word tasted like poison and honey on her tongue. The sacred connection that Lycan shared with their chosen ones, the bond that was supposed to be reserved for their own kind. Never with a vampire, never with the enemy. Cale's father, Alpha King Magnus, pushed through the crowd, his massive form radiating authority and rage. "What have you done, boy? Do you understand what you've just—" He stopped mid-sentence, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. His expression shifted from fury to something closer to horror. No, the old magic, the soul-bound curse. Serafina's own father materialized beside her in that unnervingly fast way vampires moved, his ancient eyes assessing the situation with centuries of wisdom. Lord Damien Nightshade, head of the Vampire Council, was a creature of immaculate control, but even he looked shaken. "The prophecy," he breathed. "I thought it was just a legend." "What prophecy?" Serafina managed to ask, though her vision was starting to blur. The venom, or whatever this was doing something to her body. Her fangs ached, her skin felt too tight, and underneath it all, she could feel Cale's heartbeat as if it were her own. An elderly wolf woman pushed forward, her white hair braided with silver charms. Elder Mora, the pack's historian and seer. The binding of opposites, written in the old texts before the Great Schism, when our kinds were one people. Her gaze moved between Cale and Serafina with something that might have been wonder or might have been pity. When a Lycan of royal blood attempts to kill a vampire of equal standing during a time of negotiated peace, and that vampire's heart holds no malice toward the Lycan's people, the ancient magic intervenes. It binds their souls, making them true mates, forcing them to choose between their love and their loyalties. "I don't love him," Serafina spat, even as her traitorous heart lurched at the lie. She didn't love him, she barely knew him, but the bond was already weaving something between them that felt terrifyingly close to need. "You will," Elder Mora said simply, "or you'll both go mad. The bond will demand completion, a claiming, a marking, a union of souls. If you resist, it will tear you apart from the inside." Kale's hands clenched into fists. I won't betray my pack for a bloodsucker. But she could feel his resolve wavering, could feel the pull he was fighting just as hard as she was. Magnus stepped between them, his voice dropping to a growl that made every wolf in the room straighten. Then we end this now, before it goes any further. We kill the vampire, consequences be damned. You'll kill your son, too, Damien countered, his own power rising, the temperature in the room dropping until frost began to form on the windows. The bond works both ways. Her death is his death now, and vice versa. The two leaders faced off, centuries of hatred crackling in the air between them, while Serafina tried to process what was happening. She'd come to this summit hoping for peace, real peace, not the fragile ceasefires that never lasted. Her younger brother had died in the last conflict, caught in an ambush on the border. She'd be tired of the killing, tired of the endless cycle of revenge and bloodshed. And Kale, she could feel his memories now, bleeding through the bond, had lost his mother to a vampire raid when he was 12. He'd been raised on stories of vampire cruelty, taught that her kind were monsters who fed on the innocent and reveled in death. They were supposed to hate each other. They did hate each other. So why did her soul keep reaching for his? There might be another way, Elder Mora said, her voice cutting through the tension. The old texts speak of a trial, 3 tasks ordained by the moon goddess herself that would test the bond and determine its worthiness. If the pair can complete them, the bond becomes permanent and blessed, a bridge between our peoples, as was always intended. If they fail, she trailed off meaningfully. If they fail, Magnus pressed. The bond dissolves, and they can go their separate ways. No harm, no lasting connection. Serafina felt Kale's surge of hope through their link, followed immediately by a confusing twist of disappointment. She understood both feelings. She was experiencing them herself. "What are the tasks?" she asked, forcing herself to her feet. The world swayed, but she locked her knees and met Elder Mora's ancient gaze. "They're different for every pair. The goddess reveals them when the time is right, but they always test the same things: trust, sacrifice, and truth." The old woman's expression softened. "You'll know them when you face them." Damien moved to Serafina's side, his hand on her shoulder. "Daughter, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. The council has resources." "To do what? Live with half a soul? Feel him dying slowly while I continue existing?" She shook her head. "If there's a chance to break this bond honorably, I have to take it." Across the room, Magnus was having a similar conversation with Kale, his voice too low for human ears but perfectly audible to vampires. "She's manipulating you already, can't you see? This is exactly what they want, to infiltrate our pack, to weaken us from within." "I can feel her, Father. Everything she feels. She's not manipulating anyone. She's as trapped as I am." Kale's jaw was set in that stubborn way that reminded Serafina absurdly of her own brother. "If these trials can free us both, then I'll complete them. For the pack, for our future." The words stung more than they should have, given that she agreed with the sentiment entirely. Magnus studied his son for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Fine, but you'll have guards." "No." Elder Mora's voice was firm. "The trials must be completed alone, just the bonded pair. Any outside interference will void the magic entirely and trap them in the bond forever, with no hope of dissolution." The Alpha King looked like he wanted to argue, but something in the Elder's expression stopped him. Finally, he turned to Damien. "A temporary truce, then, until the trials are complete. My son and your daughter will have safe passage through both our territories." "Agreed," Damien said, though his expression was troubled. He pulled Serafina aside, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Be careful, little star. Prophecies and ancient magic are tricky things. Sometimes they give us exactly what we ask for, and nothing that we need." She wanted to ask what he meant, but the room was already dissolving into activity. Councils conferring, guards being posted. The summit effectively ended before it had truly begun. Kael approached her, and the bond thrummed with awareness. Up close, she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, could smell the pine and earth scent that clung to his skin. He was beautiful in that wild, dangerous way that Lycans often were, all controlled power and predatory grace. "We should start immediately," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Elder Mora said the first trial would present itself at the border between our lands. There's an old temple there, abandoned since the schism." "I know it," Serafina replied. She'd played in those ruins as a child, before the war escalated, and nowhere was safe. "Dawn, then. I'll need to feed before we travel." She saw him flinch at the reminder of what she was, felt his automatic revulsion through the bond. But she also felt something else, curiosity, and underneath that, a reluctant attraction that he was trying desperately to suppress. It would have been easier if she didn't feel the same way, if the bond was only magic, only obligation. But every time she looked at him, something in her chest ached with wanting, and she knew it wasn't entirely the bond's doing. That terrified her more than anything else. The temple materialized from the morning mist like a ghost from the past, its white columns stained with age and wrapped in climbing vines. Serafina and Kael had traveled in silence, the journey awkward and tense, both of them hyper-aware of the other's presence in ways that went beyond normal senses. Shed fed before they left, a willing donor from her household, though she'd felt Kael's disgust ripple through the bond even from a distance. He didn't understand that most vampires didn't kill when they fed, that the exchange could be consensual and even pleasurable for both parties. He only knew the stories of rogues and monsters, the worst of her kind. Just as she only knew the stories of Lycan savagery, the tales of wolves who hunted for sport and tore apart anything weaker than themselves. The bond was already forcing her to question those stories. "There," Kael said, pointing to an altar at the temple's center. On it sat a single silver chalice, glowing faintly with moonlight despite the morning sun. They approached together, careful not to touch, though the bond pulled at them both, a constant magnetic force that made the distance between them feel wrong. As they reached the altar, Elder Mora's voice seemed to echo from the stones themselves, though the old woman was miles away. "Your first trial, the cup of truth. Each must drink, and each must answer 3 questions with absolute honesty. If either lies, even by omission, the bond will tighten, dragging you toward a claiming you don't want. Only truth will set you free." Serafina's hands trembled as she reached for the chalice. The liquid inside was clear as water, but smelled of moonflowers and something older, wilder. Magic. "Ladies first," Kael offered, and there was no mockery in his voice, only exhaustion. He looked as drained as she felt, the bond's constant emotional feedback wearing on them both. She drank. The liquid was cool and tasteless, but the moment it touched her tongue, she felt a compulsion settle over her, an inability to speak anything but truth. "Question 1, the temple whispered. "Why did you come to the peace summit?" "My brother died in the war," Serafina heard herself say, the words pulled from her throat by magic. "He was 17, barely more than a child. He was gentle and kind and wanted to be a healer, not a warrior. But the war didn't care about his dreams. A Lycan patrol caught him near the border. They didn't even ask questions, just tore him apart." Her voice broke. "I came because I'm tired of losing people I love. I came because I thought maybe, just maybe, this generation could be different." She felt Kayel's guilt spike through the bond, sharp and painful. His hands clenched at his sides. "Question 2, the temple continued. What do you fear most about this bond?" The truth pulled at her again, relentless. "That I'll fall in love with him. That I'll betray everything my brother died for by giving my heart to one of the creatures who killed him. That I'll become the traitor my people will inevitably call me, all because some ancient magic decided we were meant to be mates." Tears she hadn't known she was crying tracked down her cheeks. Through the bond, she felt Kayel's shock and his understanding. Question 3. The temple's voice was gentler now, almost sad. "If you could break the bond right now, with no trials, no consequences, would you?" Serafina opened her mouth to say yes, of course she would, but the word wouldn't come. Because it would be a lie. "I don't know," she whispered finally. "I should want that. I should want to be free of him, free of this pull. But there's a part of me, a growing part, that's terrified of losing this connection, of never knowing what we could have been, if the world were different, if we were different." The chalice glowed brighter, accepting her truth. She passed it to Kayel with shaking hands. He drank, and she watched his pupils dilate as the magic took hold. Question 1. Why did you attack Serafina at the summit? His voice was rough when he answered, the words clearly painful. "Because I was afraid. The peace talks were going well, too well. I could see my father starting to believe in the possibility of coexistence, could see our pack's warriors lowering their guards. And all I could think was that vampires are clever, patient predators, that this was a trap, that if we let ourselves trust, we'd end up like my mother, betrayed and dead." He paused. "So I decided to end it, to attack first, to give my father a reason to walk away from the negotiations. I chose Serafina because she was—" He stopped, struggling. "Because she was what?" the temple pressed. "Because she was beautiful," he admitted, the words seeming to tear from his throat. "Because I'd been watching her all evening, drawn to her in a way that made no sense, that made me angry at myself. Because I wanted to stop wanting her, and killing her seemed like the only way." Serafina's breath caught. Through the bond, she could feel the truth of his words, the shame and self-loathing that came with them. Question 2. What do you fear most about this bond? "That it's real," Kale said immediately. "That she really is my mate, not because of some curse or trick, but because on some fundamental level we're meant to be together. That means questioning everything I was taught, everything I believed about vampires being soulless monsters. It means accepting that I killed my mother's murderers for revenge, not justice, and that maybe some of the vampires my pack has killed over the years were just as innocent as Serafina's brother." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "It means I might be the monster in this story." The bond flooded with his anguish, and Serafina found herself taking a step toward him before she could stop herself. His pain was her pain now. There was no separating them. "If you could break the bond right now, with no trials, no consequences, would you?" The silence stretched between them. Kale's jaw worked, and she could feel the war raging inside him. Duty against desire, loyalty against truth. "No," he finally said, and the word fell like a stone into still water. "Not anymore. Not after feeling everything she feels, seeing the world through her eyes. She's not what I thought vampires were, and I need to know, I need to understand, if we're really mates, or if this is just magic forcing us together. I need to know if what I'm starting to feel is real." The chalice blazed with light, then shattered, not violently, but like ice melting in spring, dissolving into mist that wrapped around both their wrists before fading. The temple's voice came one last time. "First trial complete. You have spoken truth, and truth has bound you closer. Proceed to the grove of sacrifices for your second trial. But beware. Honesty was the easy part. What comes next will cost you more than words." They stood in the ruined silence, neither able to meet the other's eyes. Everything had been laid bare between them, every fear, every unwanted feeling, every truth they'd tried to hide. Finally, Serafina spoke. "Your mother, how did she die?" She felt his hesitation through the bond, but the after-effects of the truth magic still lingered, making evasion difficult. "Vampire raid on our northern border. I was 12. She was leading a supply caravan to an allied pack, medical supplies, food for their winter stores. The vampires ambushed them at dusk. By the time our warriors arrived, everyone was dead, drained completely." His voice was hollow. "They said my mother fought to protect the others, that she killed 3 vampires before they overwhelmed her." "I'm sorry," Serafina said, and meant it. Through the bond, she could feel his grief, old and scarred, but still tender. "For what it's worth, raids like that, they're not sanctioned by the council." Rogue vampires, lost to bloodlust, do things that the rest of us would never condone. "Like my pack has rogues who hunt for sport," Kale acknowledged quietly, "who see your people as prey, not equals." He finally met her eyes. "Your brother, what was his name?" "Lucian." The name hurt to say out loud. "He was gentle, loved music and books. He wanted to study medicine, to help people instead of hurt them. Our father thought he was weak, but I knew better. It takes more strength to choose compassion in a world built on violence." They started walking, following the pull of the bond toward their next trial. The forest around them was neutral territory, belonging to neither pack nor coven, wild and untamed. "Tell me about him," Kale said after a while. "Lucian, I want to know." So she did. She told him about Lucian's terrible singing voice and his gift for healing even the most injured animals. About how he'd cried when he had to drink blood the first time. How he'd insisted on only taking from willing donors, and even then, only the minimum amount to survive. About his dream of opening a hospital where vampires and other creatures could receive care without prejudice. And Kale listened, really listened. And through the bond, she could feel his regret growing. Not guilt exactly, because he hadn't been part of the patrol that killed Lucian, but a deep, aching sorrow for the loss of someone who could have been an ally in another life. "My mother was like that," he said eventually. "She believed in peace. Used to tell me that Lycans and vampires were cousins once, split by some ancient disagreement we no longer even remembered. My father forbade her from spreading those ideas after they made it, said it made the pack look weak, but she never stopped believing." He smiled sadly. "Maybe that's why the bond chose us, because we're both carrying their dreams." The thoughts settled between them, heavy and meaningful. As the sun climbed higher, they reached a clearing dominated by a massive oak tree, its trunk wider than a house, its branches reaching toward the sky like supplicating hands. At its base was a stone marker, carved with symbols Serafina recognized from her childhood, the old language from before the schism. "The Grove of Sacrifices," Kyle read, his finger tracing the symbols. "Here all bonds are tested. Here all truths come at a cost." A figure emerged from behind the tree, not Elder Mora this time, but something older, something that made Serafina's vampire instinct scream danger. It was vaguely humanoid, but made of bark and leaves, moss and moonlight. A forest spirit, ancient and powerful. "Second trial," it said, in a voice like wind through trees. "The sacrifice of self. Each of you must give up something precious, something that defines who you are. Only through loss can you understand what truly matters." The spirit gestured, and the tree trunk split open, revealing a hollow space within. Inside were two objects, a vial of shimmering silver liquid and a lever collar studded with moonstones. "For the vampire," the spirit said, pointing to the vial, "your immortality, captured and contained. Drink from this, and you will become mortal, aging, vulnerable, capable of true death." Serafina's blood ran cold. Immortality wasn't just a gift, it was what made her vampire. Without it, she would be human, weak, unable to protect herself or her people. "For the Lycan," the spirit continued, pointing to the collar, "your wolf, bound and sleeping. Wear this and you will lose your ability to shift, to connect with your pack mind, to be truly wolf." Kael's reaction mirrored her own horror. His wolf wasn't just an animal, it was part of his soul, his identity. Without it, he wouldn't be Lycan anymore. "You don't have to sacrifice these things permanently," the spirit clarified. "Only for 7 days. 7 days of being less than you are. 7 days of vulnerability and dependence. If you both survive, and if your bond survives, you'll be restored." "And if we refuse?" Serafina asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then the bond tightens. The pull becomes irresistible. Within hours, you'll be unable to resist the claiming, unable to think of anything but completing the mate bond." The spirit's expression was unreadable. "This trial asks, are you willing to trust each other with your weakness? Are you willing to need each other when everything in you wants to be strong and independent?" Serafina looked at Kael. Through the bond, she could feel his turmoil matching her own. 7 days without her immortality meant 7 days where a simple accident could kill her. 7 days where she'd feel hunger and thirst and exhaustion like a human. 7 days of being helpless. And Kael without his wolf would be even worse. Lycans derived much of their strength and healing from their wolves. Without it, he'd be barely stronger than a human, vulnerable to attacks from rogues or enemies. They'd have to protect each other, trust each other completely. The bond was already forcing intimacy, but this would require something deeper. A choice to be vulnerable, not just emotionally, but physically. "We could refuse," Kael said quietly. "Let the bond complete. Would that really be so terrible?" Through their connection, Serafina felt the temptation in his words, and underneath it, the fear. Fear that if they gave in now, they'd never know if their feelings were real or just magic. Fear that they'd be betraying their people for something that might not even be genuine. "Yes," she said firmly, "it would be. Because I need to know that if I choose you, if we choose each other, it's real. Not just ancient magic making the decision for us." She reached for the vial, her hands shaking. 7 days. We can survive 7 days. Kael grabbed the collar, his jaw set. Together. They looked at each other, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Not the bond. That was already there, already pulling them together. This was something else. A decision. A partnership. Serafina uncorked the vial and drank. The liquid was cold, burning cold, and she felt her immortality being ripped away like a cloak torn from her shoulders. Suddenly, she was aware of her heartbeat in a way she hadn't been in centuries. Fragile, mortal, capable of stopping. She felt the sun's heat on her skin, no longer comfortable but potentially dangerous. Felt thirst, real thirst. Not just the craving for blood, but the desperate need for water. She swayed, and Kael caught her, his touch sending sparks through the bond. "I've got you," he said, and then he put on the collar. She felt his wolf howl in protest through their connection, felt the terrible silence as that part of him went quiet, locked away. His strength dimmed, his senses dulled, and his face went gray with the loss. He stumbled, and now it was her turn to catch him, her mortal body barely strong enough to keep them both upright. They clung to each other in the clearing, two creatures who'd been powerful, now reduced to something fragile and human. The vulnerability was terrifying. And somehow, in that terror, Serafina felt closer to Kael than she had to anyone in her long life. 7 days, she repeated, her voice hoarse. Together, he agreed. The spirit nodded, satisfied. The grove has accepted your sacrifice. Survive until the full moon rises 7 days hence, and your trial will be complete. But know this. Your enemies will sense your weakness. The bond has made you targets. Guard each other well. Then the spirit melted back into the tree, leaving them alone in the clearing, mortal and powerless and completely dependent on each other for survival. They made camp that night in a cave Kael remembered from his childhood explorations, far enough from both vampire and Lycan territories to be relatively safe. Relatively being the operative word. Serafina could feel how exposed they were now, how many threats existed that they'd never had to fear before. "I'm cold," she admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. Vampires didn't feel cold, but humans did, and she was shivering, her body temperature regulation completely off. Kael built a fire with hands that shook from his own weakness. Without his wolf's strength, even simple tasks were exhausting. But he didn't complain, just focused on getting the flames going, then moved to sit beside her. "We should stay close," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Body heat will help." She nodded and let him pull her against his side. The bond hummed with contentment at the contact, and she felt his heartbeat against her back, steady and strong despite everything. "Tell me about your pack," she said, needing the distraction from their situation. He was quiet for a moment, his breath stirring her hair. "It's family. All of us, connected through the pack bonds. Not as intense as this," he gestured between them, "but always there. A sense of belonging, of purpose. From the moment we're born, we know we're part of something bigger than ourselves." "That sounds beautiful," Serafina said honestly. "Vampires are different. We form covens, but we're more independent, solitary predators by nature, even when we choose to live together. Do you ever get lonely?" The question surprised her with its insight. Yes, especially after Lucien died. He was the only one who really understood me, who saw me as more than just Lord Damien's daughter or a useful alliance piece. She paused. "Do you get lonely?" "Sometimes. Even surrounded by the pack, there are things you can't share. Doubts, questions, dreams that don't fit with what you're supposed to want." He tightened his arm around her slightly. "Like the fact that I used to sneak to the border, hoping to catch glimpses of vampire territory. Not to scout for attacks, just to see. To understand what I was supposed to hate so much." "I did the same thing," Serafina confessed. "Watched Lycan pups playing in the moonlight. Saw how your warriors trained together. Saw the community you built. I wondered what it would be like to belong to something like that." They fell silent, the fire crackling between them and the night sounds of the forest creating a strange peace. Through the bond, Serafina could feel Kael's confusion mixing with something warmer, something that felt dangerously like affection. "This is the longest we've been together without arguing," he observed. "We've been together less than 2 days." "Exactly." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Maybe the trials are working. Maybe we're actually learning to stand each other. Before she could respond, a howl split the night. Not Lycan, but something else. Something hungry. Kale tensed, his hand instinctively going to where his claws would have been if he still had access to his wolf. Dire wolves. Rogues who've given in to their feral nature. Usually my scent would be enough to warn them off, but without my wolf, they'll see us as prey. Serafina finished grimly. She stood, looking around for a weapon, anything. Her vampire speed and strength were gone, leaving her frustratingly human. The howls grew closer, and then she saw them. 3 massive shapes circling their cave, eyes glowing red in the darkness. Dire wolves were what happened when Lycans lost themselves completely to the beast, giving up their humanity for pure animal instinct. They were dangerous even to normal Lycans. To a weakened Lycan and a mortal vampire, they were deadly. "Stay behind me," Kale said, positioning himself between her and the entrance. "You can barely stand," Serafina protested. "We fight together or not at all." She felt his reluctance through the bond. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to protect her, even though logically he knew she was right. They were equally vulnerable now. The lead direwolf lunged, and Serafina grabbed a burning branch from the fire, thrusting it toward the creature's face. It yelped and retreated, but the other 2 were already moving, trying to flank them. Kale kicked at one, his mortal strength still enough to make it hesitate, but he was breathing hard, and Serafina could feel his exhaustion through the bond. They fought back to back, holding off the direwolves with fire and desperation, but it wasn't enough. One of the creatures got past Serafina's guard, its jaws closing on her arm. She screamed, feeling her bone crack under the pressure, pain like she'd never experienced in her immortal life flooding her system. Kale roared, something primal and furious rising in him despite the loss of his wolf. He grabbed a sharp rock and drove it into the direwolf's eye, making it release Serafina and retreat, howling. The 3 rogues circled again, and Serafina knew they couldn't survive another assault. Her arm was useless, possibly broken, and Kale was swaying on his feet. Then she felt it, a pulse through the bond, Kale's determination crystallizing into something powerful. "Trust me," he said, and through their connection, she understood what he was asking. The bond. They could use the bond. She opened herself completely to him, dropping every mental shield she'd been maintaining. His presence flooded her mind, and hers flooded his, 2 souls tangling together, becoming something more than the sum of their parts. Power surged between them, not vampire speed or Lycan strength, but something different, something that belonged only to true mates. The direwolf sensed it and hesitated, whimpering. This was old magic, primal magic, the kind that demanded respect even from feral creatures. Kale raised his hand, and Serafina raised hers to mirror him, their movements perfectly synchronized. They spoke together, words in the old language that neither of them had known they remembered. "By moon and blood, by bond and sacrifice, we claim this ground as sacred. We claim each other as mates, and we claim the protection that is our right." Light exploded from their joined souls, brilliant silver and gold, and the direwolves fled, unable to withstand the power of a true mate bond being acknowledged and claimed. As quickly as it had come, the power faded, leaving them gasping and exhausted on the cave floor. "What was that?" Serafina whispered, still feeling the echo of their combined presence in her mind. "I don't know," Kale admitted, "but it felt right, like we were supposed to do that." He crawled to her side, gently examining her arm. Even in the firelight, she could see the bruising spreading, the unnatural angle of her wrist. In her vampire form, this would have healed in minutes. As a mortal, she was looking at weeks of recovery, if infection didn't set in first. "I need to set it," Kale said quietly. "It's going to hurt." She nodded, biting her lip. He worked quickly and competently, clearly drawing on training from his pack's healers. But even with his gentleness, the pain was blinding. She felt tears streaming down her face, felt him suffering with her through the bond, sharing her agony. When it was done, he'd torn strips from his shirt to bind her arm, creating a makeshift splint. They sat together in the firelight, shaking from shock and pain and exhaustion. "Thank you," she said finally, "for protecting me, for saving me." "You saved me too," he replied. "When you opened the bond completely, that took courage. You gave me access to your mind, your soul. You could have died if I'd wanted to hurt you. But you didn't. You wouldn't." It wasn't a question. Through the bond, she knew his truth now. He could no more hurt her than hurt himself. "When we used that power together," Kale said slowly, "when we called each other mates, we meant it, didn't we? It wasn't just to scare off the direwolves." Seraphina's breath caught, because he was right. In that moment, joining their souls and speaking those ancient words, she'd meant every syllable. She'd claimed him, just as he'd claimed her, and it hadn't felt like obligation or magic forcing her hand. It had felt like coming home. "Yes," she whispered, "I meant it. I know we've only known each other days. I know we should still hate each other, but—" "But you're mine," Kale finished, his voice rough with emotion, "and I'm yours. However this happened, whatever the bond is or isn't, that part is real. I feel it in every heartbeat." He pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injury, and she let herself sink into his embrace. The bond wrapped around them like a blanket, warm and right and true. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Me too. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of choosing each other, being brave enough to be afraid." They stayed like that until dawn, holding each other, feeling each other's presence through the bond, and slowly accepting what was becoming undeniable. This wasn't just ancient magic, or a curse, or a trial to overcome. This was real, and that changed everything. 3*. The next 5 days passed in a blur of survival and discovery. They traveled slowly, limited by Seraphina's injury and their mortal limitations. Kale hunted small game, clumsily, without his wolf's instincts, but with determination that made her heart ache. She gathered herbs and roots, drawing on knowledge her mother had taught her centuries ago, before vampirism had made such things unnecessary. They were playing house, she realized one evening as they made camp. Playing at being normal people, not supernatural creatures bound by duty and destiny. And the terrifying part was how much she liked it. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Kyle said that night, lying beside her under the stars. They'd given up pretending they needed separate sleeping spaces. The bond pulled them together anyway, and combined body heat was practical. "I wanted to be human once," Seraphina admitted, "before Lucian was born, when I was young and new to immortality. I watched human families, saw how they loved and lived and died together, and I envied them. The simplicity of it, the meaning that mortality gave to their moments." "Do you still feel that way?" She considered. "Not anymore, or maybe in a different way. I don't want to be human. I just want to choose my own path, not have it dictated by what I am or who my father needs me to be." She turned to look at him. "Your turn. Secret." "I've been writing poetry," Kyle said, sounding embarrassed. "About you. About us. Terrible poetry, probably, but I can't stop. The words just come, and I need to get them out." Seraphina's heart melted. "Can I hear some?" "Absolutely not." But she could feel his pleased embarrassment through the bond, and she smiled. "I'll wear you down eventually. Probably." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "You're very persistent. It's one of the things I'm learning to love about you." The words hung between them. learning to love. Not loved yet, but heading that direction. Honest and real and terrifying. Kael, she said softly, when the trials are over, when we have our powers back and have to face our people, what happens to us? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. A Lycan prince and a vampire heir, the alliance would be powerful, but the backlash would be enormous. There are factions in my pack who would never accept you, just as there are vampires in your coven who see all Lycans as beasts. We could run, she suggested, hating herself for the cowardice of it. Take our powers back and disappear. Find somewhere neither of our peoples could find us. We could, Kael agreed, but that's not who we are, is it? We both came to that summit wanting peace, wanting change. Running away doesn't accomplish that. So we stay and fight, for each other, for the bond, for the chance at real peace. Yeah, he pulled her closer. We fight, together. She kissed him then, couldn't stop herself anymore. It was gentle and sweet and tasted like hope, and through the bond she felt his love rising to meet hers, still fragile and new, but growing stronger every day. When they pulled apart, she saw the same wonder in his eyes that she felt in her heart. This is going to be complicated, she whispered against his lips. Absolutely catastrophic, he agreed, then kissed her again. On the 7th day, they reached the site of the final trial, a stone circle on a hill, ancient and powerful, humming with old magic. The full moon was rising, huge and silver, and Seraphina could feel her immortality beginning to return as the vial's magic faded. Beside her, Kael's collar had started to glow, ready to release his wolf. Elder Mora was waiting for them, along with both the Alpha King and Lord Damien. The sight of their fathers brought reality crashing back. They'd been living in a bubble, just the two of them, but now they had to face the consequences of their choices. Third trial, Elder Mora announced, the trial of truth and choice. You have survived vulnerability and learned to trust each other. Now you must answer the question that matters most. Knowing what the bond will cost you, knowing the opposition you'll face, do you still choose each other? Or will you dissolve the bond and return to your separate peoples? The collar fell from Kael's neck, and Seraphina felt his wolf surge back, powerful and joyful. Her own immortality snapped into place, strength flooding her limbs, her broken arm healing in seconds. They were themselves again, powerful, dangerous, no longer dependent on each other for survival. It would be so easy to walk away now, to say the trials were complete, the bond proven, and they'd learned their lesson, to go back to their old lives, their old certainties. Magnus stepped forward, his voice firm. Son, you've completed the trials admirably. No one can question your strength or honor now. Come home, lead our pack into the future. Damien moved towards Seraphina. Daughter, you've shown courage and wisdom. The council is proud. Come back to us. Help rebuild our coven's strength. Both offers were genuine. She could see that. Neither father was trying to manipulate them. They simply wanted their children back, wanted things to return to how they were. But Seraphina knew with bone-deep certainty that she couldn't go back, wouldn't go back. She looked at Kael and found him already watching her, his golden eyes steady and sure. I choose the bond, they said together, their voices overlapping. I choose us. Magnus's face fell, and Damien's expression tightened with worry, but neither seemed truly surprised. Then you understand what this means? Elder Mora pressed. You'll be married under the old laws, bound not just as mates, but as political figures. Your union will force a reckoning between your peoples, peace or war, but no more avoiding the question. We understand, Kael said, taking Seraphina's hand, and we're ready. Are you? Magnus's voice was harsh. Son, they'll call you traitor. They'll say you chose a bloodsucker over your own kind. Some will challenge you, try to take your place as heir. Let them try, Cale replied, his voice steady. I am your son, father, but I am also her mate. Both truths can exist. Both loyalties can be honored. It's time our peoples learn that. Damien approached Seraphina, his ancient eyes sad but understanding. Little star, this will be harder than you imagine. The old ones, the purebloods, they'll never accept a Lycan in our midst. Then the old ones will have to adapt, Seraphina said firmly, because I'm not giving him up. Not for politics, not for tradition, not for fear. This bond is the best thing that's ever happened to me, Father. Please understand, I'm not abandoning our people. I'm trying to give them a future beyond endless war. Damien studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're so much like your mother. She would have approved, I think. He turned to Magnus. It seems our children have made their choice. The question is, what will we do about it? The two leaders faced each other across the stone circle, centuries of hatred and mistrust crackling between them. Finally, Magnus spoke. A royal wedding. Public, binding, witnessed by both our peoples. If they're truly committed to this path, let them prove it before everyone. Agreed, Damien said. Under the full moon, 1 month from tonight. Time enough to prepare, and for them to change their minds if they're not certain. We won't change our minds, Seraphina said. No, Cale agreed, squeezing her hand. We won't. Elder Mora smiled, her ancient face crinkling with joy. Then the trials are complete. The bond is recognized as true. May the moon goddess bless your union and grant you the strength to build the bridges our peoples so desperately need. She gestured, and the stone circle blazed with light, magic pouring over Seraphina and Cale, not changing them, but marking them. When the light faded, they both bore new marks, a moon and star symbol on their wrists, silvery and faintly glowing, a visible sign of their bond. Impossible to hide. The families departed shortly after, leaving Seraphina and Cale alone in the stone circle as the full moon reached its peak. A month, Seraphina said. 1 month until we're married and officially start a political incident. I can't wait, Cale replied, and through the bond she felt his truth. No fear, no hesitation. Just certainty and love and determination to make this work. She pulled him down into a kiss, deeper and more passionate than before, letting herself feel everything, the love, the hope, the rightness of choosing him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. Promise me something, he said quietly. Anything. When it gets hard, and it will get hard, promise you won't regret this, won't regret us. Seraphina cupped his face in her hands, looking into his golden eyes. I promise, because you're not just my mate, Kyle Thornwood. You're my partner, my future, my choice, and I will never regret choosing love over fear. He kissed her again, and the bond sang between them, bright and true and unbreakable. The month passed in a whirlwind of preparations and politics. As expected, there was opposition, from both sides. A faction of Magnus's pack tried to challenge Kyle for the right to be heir, claiming he was unfit to lead if he'd chosen a vampire. Kyle defeated them cleanly and firmly, proving his strength hadn't diminished. In the vampire coven, several of the old purebloods attempted to have Seraphina removed from the line of succession. Her father shut them down with an iron will, reminding them that she was his daughter and heir, and her choices were hers to make. But there were also surprises. A group of young Lycans and vampires, inspired by Seraphina and Kael's courage, began meeting at the border. Carefully at first, then with increasing openness. They called themselves the Bridge, and they declared their intention to build friendship between the peoples. Elder Mora became an unofficial advisor to both Seraphina and Kael, teaching them about the old ways, the time before the schism when their peoples had been one. It gave them hope that unity was possible, even if it required enormous effort. The night before the wedding, Seraphina stood on her balcony, looking out at the neutral territory where the ceremony would take place. A grand pavilion had been erected, half in Lycan style, half in vampire aesthetic, symbolizing the union they were trying to create. Kael appeared beside her, moving with that impossible Lycan silence. She wasn't surprised. They could feel each other through the bond now, always knew where the other was. "Nervous?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Terrified," she admitted, but in a good way, the kind of fear that means you're about to do something important. "I finished the poem," Kael said suddenly, "the one I've been writing, about us." "Really? Can I finally hear it?" He cleared his throat, and she could feel his embarrassment through the bond, but also his determination. Then he began to speak. She was moonlight in a world of shadow, a silver blade against the dark. I was meant to end her, destroy the glow. Instead, she stole my frozen heart. Death brought life, and hate brought love. The curse became our greatest gift. Now, bound by stars and moon above, we'll heal the ancient, bitter rift. Some will say we're fools or traitors, that we betrayed our people's trust. But we are builders, not creators, of the wars that turned love to dust. So let them whisper, let them rage. We'll write a different story's page. Seraphina felt tears streaming down her face. "That's beautiful. You're beautiful." "I'm terrible at poetry," Kael protested, but she could feel his pleasure at her reaction. "You're perfect," she corrected, turning in his arms to kiss him. "And tomorrow, you'll be my husband." "Tomorrow, you'll be my wife," he agreed. "My mate, my partner, my everything." They stayed on the balcony until dawn, wrapped in each other and the bond, ready to face whatever came next. The wedding was spectacular and surreal. Hundreds of Lycans and vampires attended, many of them armed and wary, but all of them curious. The ceremony blended both traditions, blood and moon, pack bonds and coven oaths, ancient words spoken in languages most had forgotten. When Magnus and Damien jointly declared them wed, the crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered, some remained silent, and a few actually hissed or growled their disapproval. But Seraphina and Kael didn't care. They only had eyes for each other, the bond blazing between them bright enough that some claimed they could see it, a golden thread connecting the prince and the heir, the Lycan and the vampire, the past and the future. They kissed as newlywed mates, and in that moment something shifted in the world. Not dramatically, not a sudden peace or magical transformation, but subtly. A crack in the ancient hatred, a possibility. Later, at the reception, Seraphina found herself talking to a young Lycan warrior named Sarah, who approached hesitantly. "Lady Seraphina," Sarah said, her voice shy, "I just wanted to say, thank you. My little brother is friends with a vampire kid from the border. They play together sometimes, and we've always had to hide it, keep it secret. But maybe now, maybe they can be friends openly." Seraphina felt tears prick her eyes again. That's all we want, for the children to have different choices than we did. Sarah nodded and slipped back into the crowd, but the moment stayed with Seraphina, warming her heart. Kael found her as the moon reached its peak, extending his hand. "Dance with me, wife." "Always, husband." They moved together on the dance floor, perfectly in sync, Not because of the bond, but because they'd learned each other, chosen each other, fought for each other. "No regrets?" Kale murmured against her ear. Serafina smiled, feeling the bond hum with contentment, feeling the future stretching before them, uncertain and challenging, but full of possibility. Not a single one. As they danced under the full moon, Lycan and Vampire watching with mixed emotions, Serafina and Kale both felt the same truth echoing through their bond. This was just the beginning. The trials had tested them, proven them. But the real work, building peace, bridging two worlds, creating something new from ancient hatred, that work would take a lifetime. But they had a lifetime now, together, and that made everything possible. The Lycan had bitten the vampire to kill her, instead had bound their souls forever. And in that binding, they'd found something neither had known they were looking for. Love, true and deep and worth fighting for. A love that might just change the world.